And a lot of the way that we can really, I think, make a difference as leaders is to use appreciation and positive feedback to people on a continual basis. That we almost can't do enough of giving people appreciation if it's done genuinely. By that I mean, it's not going and saying, great job, thanks a lot, and moving on. It's saying, you know, that was a very difficult meeting. You know, there were some very different positions, and you took the time to summarize the different positions really carefully and really effectively. And that helped, I think, us all move forward. So thank you very much for doing that. Do you know what I mean in terms of giving appreciation? And I believe that when we do that as leaders, it creates a ripple effect through the whole organization, which affects the emotional environment. What else do we need to do to build engagement? We need to give people these sorts of leadership and management behaviors, the information they need, the learning opportunities that Weber talked about are absolutely critical, feedback to people building confidence, supporting them to innovate. You know, so many organizations I go to, there is a value expressed in the company mission statement about encouraging innovation, but when you talk to employees, they tell you the story of when they try something out, they get their heads whacked for not doing things in a standard way. Leaders who value, respect and support them, and it's about building a culture of trust. It's about ensuring that when leaders espouse certain values, when they say what matters in the organization, people are our most important asset, that it actually translates into behavior. Because when leaders make promises about their behaviors and then don't fulfill them, it undermines the trust in the organization. And trust, I think, is fundamental to engagement and to community. Making sure that the criteria for recruitment and promotion mirror what we say about the organization's aims. So if great customer service is the value, then we should be promoting people and recruiting people who give great customer service rather than who spend their time flattering the leader. Flat hierarchies and having lots of celebrations of accomplishment seem really important, and ensuring that the focus of the organization's systems is on meeting customers' needs, because people at work want to give great customer service. I don't think anyone wants to come to work and give bad service to customers. But when they're forced into a situation where they can't give service because of the way the organization runs, it undermines engagement. Now, Rolf referred to the work that I've been doing on team working, and the fact that we have been working in teams for the last 150,000 years. Until 200 years ago, out of that 150,000 years, until 200 years ago, there were probably only 2 or 3 organizations in this country, or virtually any other country, bigger than about 30 people. Until 200 years ago, most people, all their lives, worked in groups of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, maximum 30, apart from the religious and the military. And yet in the last 200 years, we've created these big organizations. Even this bank, which is a small bank of 480 people, is far bigger than people would have been used to 200 years ago. And I believe that we are uniquely developed to work as teams, we human beings. And the challenge for us is to recreate team working within the context of modern organizations. And on the whole, I think we fail to achieve that. And I want to suggest some practical ways that I think we can harness the power of team working within modern organizations rather than simply espousing the rhetoric of team working. So I think team-based working is a philosophy about saying, let's use teams as the way we deliver services for those that we serve, our customers, to ensure that decisions are made at the closest possible point to the customer rather than at the top of the organization. And I think there are 4 ways that we need to do this. The first is that we need to really understand what a team is about. I believe a team is not first and foremost about people. A team is first and foremost about a task. So if I need to push a very big boulder up a hill that I can't possibly push by myself, then I need a set of skills, strength, I need coordination, I need persistence to help me get that boulder up the hill. So I need to select people with those skills to get the boulder at the top of the hill. I don't want people who are going to give up halfway and the boulder roll back down. So I think we begin with a task that needs a team to do it. But often what we do in organizations, we say, this group of people works in X department, we'll call them a team. This group of people works in a particular office area, we'll call them a team. And that, I think, creates the conditions for dangerous practice within organizations. So there needs to be a real team task. Second, it needs to be bounded. What does that mean? My colleagues at Harvard, Ruth Wagaman and Richard Hackman, did a study of 120 of the top companies in the States, and they interviewed the CEO to ask the CEO who was in the team. And you can see that in this case, the CEO said there were 11 members in the team, and the CEO named them. The members said anything between 7 and 84 people. In this team, the CEO said 5, and the members said anything between 5 and 9. Only 11 out of the 120 agreed on who was in the team. And they happen to be the top performing companies. And when you think about it, if you don't know who's in the team, how do you know who to communicate with? How do you know who to share information with? And so, you know, my experience, I don't know whether you share this, is that when you ask people who is in their team, you get as many answers generally as the number of people that you ask. So how can we have effective teams when people don't know who's actually in the team in the first place? Second is we need to make sure that team size is appropriate. And the research evidence from many studies in experiments and in the field in psychology suggests you need the minimum number of people to enable you to do the job effectively. You know, if you have too many people pushing the boulder, it becomes a disaster. So the minimum number of people necessary to do the job effectively, and no more than about 8 or 9. No more than about 8 or 9. Once it gets above about 8 or 9, people have trouble communicating effectively, working interdependently, and you see in team meetings it becomes a broadcast rather than a discussion. I go to organizations in the health service where we are presented with teams of 40. These are not teams, it's crowd control, you know? And it's, the research evidence we have is it's not just an issue of naming, it is dangerous because we see higher levels of injuries, higher levels of errors, and higher levels of mortality the more pseudo teams there are in an organization. The second point is about having a clear team purpose. From our work with teams, what seems really critical is that every team should have 5 or 6 or 7 clear objectives. And those objectives, when I say clear, they should be challenging, because unless objectives are challenging, they're not motivating. They should be agreed by the team, and ideally, they should be measurable as well. So we need to be able to measure whether they've been accomplished. Clear, challenging, agreed, and measurable. And we find that the very best predictor of team effectiveness in all of our studies is the clarity of objectives that teams have. And that also means having a really clear team purpose, of there being a valued purpose that the team has that creates a sense of identity and pride in the team. So just to give you some examples about what the compelling purpose might be for a top management team in an organization, it might well cover these sorts of issues in terms of the strategy, acquiring and deploying capital, and so on. Integrating major acquisitions are the sorts of areas that a top management team might be looking at in terms of compelling purpose and objectives. And these were the objectives from the business school that I had the privilege of leading. So we tried to set very clear objectives, and we used those objectives as the agenda for our meetings. So the agenda was simply the objectives. Occasionally we added other bits, but it ensured that we were focused on what we thought were the important issues to do. We also agreed some norms of behavior as a team. 3 things we must always do, and 3 things we must never do, in order to, in some sense, make explicit the values that we held about working together, to do with providing leadership, encouraging innovation, and sharing responsibility for decisions, and ensuring that we weren't misleading each other, and ensuring that we didn't neglect promoting from and learning from the wider organization of which we were a part. I hope, by the way, that it will be possible to make available the slides for you if you would be interested to have access to them. For a top management team, I think it's really important to express what the values and norms of the team will be around issues to do with commitment and transparency. Commitment is important in a top management team because there's the danger that the individuals in the top management team represent their areas rather than take collective responsibility for the organization's functioning. And certainly I've seen that at the senior level within higher education settings, that very often top management team members are concerned with fighting for their corner rather than helping the whole organization to work effectively. And it's about transparency, participation, really being involved and taking responsibility, integrity in terms of how we support our colleagues, and again, clarity of objectives. The third point about creating effective teams, I think, is making sure that we have the right people on the team. Given we've got a boulder, we need strength, we need persistence, we need cooperation. We've got to have the right skills. And that means ensuring that we've got people who don't stand idly by, because we know from lots of work in social psychology that if people are not making equivalent effort within a team, it undermines everybody's engagement and motivation, and making sure that we also don't have levels of conflict which damage individuals. We know that interpersonal conflict in teams is actually disastrous. It's just a disaster. We know that very high levels of conflict about the task can also be very, very damaging, because what for you might be a robust argument that's been very useful might for your colleague send him home feeling really upset and he loses sleep in the night. So we need to be very careful about the individual sensibilities and sensitivities that people have to conflict, and ensure that that conflict or disagreement is cooperative, it's respectful, and has the right kind of interpersonal orientation that enables people to still feel valued and respected and trusted and supported. At the top level, by the way, at top management teams, we need conceptual thinking. We need people, that they're bright enough to run an organization, that they have the empathy to engage with the people that they leave, and the integrity to act at that level within the organization, to fulfill what they say they will do, and to be open and honest with people, to have an executive leader self-image, and to be prepared to eliminate from the team people who are behaving badly. Diversity, we know, is hugely important. My friend Sebastian's work on positive attitudes to diversity shows how important in any team positive attitudes towards diversity are. Heterogeneous teams, mixed teams, outperform homogeneous teams when the attitudes to diversity within those teams are positive, whether it's cultural diversity, functional diversity, national diversity, or age diversity, or whatever.